Welcome everyone, this is Andres Restart, and today we're talking about what may be the single best piece of evidence for Nintendo Switch 2 to be coming out next year. This is new info that came out yesterday, and what I find interesting about this is that earlier this week, literally the night before this info came out, I did a live debate on my channel where we were debating Team 2024 for Nintendo Switch 2 versus Team 2025. It was myself for Team 2024 versus Botox Games and Backlog Banter for Team 2025. It was supposed to be a 2v2, but timing didn't work out. Regardless, it was a very fun discussion, and a lot of good ideas were exchanged on both sides. But I really wish I had the information that came out yesterday morning, because I think it would have really served my argument very, very well. And what is that exactly? Well, it has to do with Nintendo Switch sales in the month of November, and, well, they're not so good. And I believe this has some very strong implications for what's to happen next year, and so that's what we're talking about today. But before going forward here, let me point out that we are aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers still. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Leave a like, it's super helpful, and enjoy the ride as we talk about Nintendo every day. So here's the news. Matt Piscatella, the executive director and video game industry analyst at Circana NPD. November video game hardware spending fell 24% when compared to a year ago to $964 million. All current generation consoles experienced a double-digit percentage decline in dollar sales when compared to a year ago, with Nintendo Switch showing the sharpest drop year on year. And so this is very important, because November, Black Friday, a big part of the holidays, is where companies see some of the strongest, the strongest sales of the year. This holiday period is where sales are done. And I'm not talking about, oh, it's like 30-40%. No, we're talking about way over half of the total sales of the year happen during the holidays. And so for this time of the year, if your sales are weak, that is not good. This is the best time to be having your sales. And I think this is actually very telling for what we should expect for the future of Nintendo. Because I've been arguing that when you take a look at what's happened throughout this year, Tears of the Kingdom, as of the last officially reported numbers, was at 19.5 million. The Mario Bros. Movie being the second most successful animated movie of all time. Those are amazing things that happened in the first half of the year, and they've really made a big difference in strengthening sales for this year. But they were a blip. They're not a consistent thing. And so because of that, Nintendo still hasn't increased their hardware sales projections, even when they are on the record for saying that both Tears of the Kingdom and the Mario Bros. Movie, extremely successful releases here, surpassed their expectations. And yet despite that, hardware sales are still not going up. And now we're getting this information here where the holiday sales are worse than last year, and they're worse than even Xbox, which hasn't been doing well. And this isn't a small market. This is the United States. This is November, the most important time of the year in terms of sales. So when you have games like Mario Wonder, when you have games like Tears of the Kingdom, when you have more bundles announced for this holiday than any other prior holiday, and you're seeing this kind of a drop-off, that is saying that we've reached a saturation point. It's not that the Switch isn't good. The Switch is amazing. The Switch is the best, most successful system currently. But this is a very, very strong sign that we are approaching the end when it comes to growing sales. And it doesn't mean that Switch is not going to get gains for a few more years, but I do think it means that Nintendo needs to start that transition, because they cannot afford to wait until the Switch is done to move on to the next system. A lot of people like to look at the past of Nintendo, but what I think a lot of people fail to consider is that in the past, Nintendo would always be supporting two different platforms. They would have the Wii and the DS. They would have the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. They would have the N64 and the Game Boy Color. Or when something like the Wii U is doing very poorly, they also have the 3DS to keep them afloat until it's time to move on. But now Nintendo doesn't do that. They focus on a singular platform. They can't afford to step back on one system while they focus on the other so they can get ready for the next generation. Instead, what Nintendo does is that they put out a lot more remakes and remasters, and they outsource a lot of other smaller projects with their third-party partners, mixed in with some of their own internal projects for sure, but a lot of their main teams are working on the next generation, and that's how they handle their transitions. That's why we talk about the 3DS so much, because with the 3DS, the Wii U was dead. So they were already functioning on that single platform when the Switch came out, and what happened during the last couple years of 3DS? It was dominated by remakes and remasters. Nintendo's already shown their hand for how they handle their transitions once with a singular platform. Games are going to consistently come out now. Nintendo has the best development ecosystem they've ever had. They sit on games, they're always ready, and so the consistent releases will continue to come, but a lot of those releases are going to be remakes and remasters. Looking at next year, of the officially announced games, we have Another Code Recollection, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Princess Peach Showtime, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Those are the 5 published Nintendo titles that are officially slated for next year. 80% of those are remakes and remasters. This is an unprecedented ratio. And they may announce other things like a new Pokemon game, for example, Metroid Prime 4 may come out next year, and that will help the ratio, but even a 50-50 ratio is still strongly suggestive that they're moving on to the next generation. And while they may announce some new games, there may also still be some other remakes and remasters that are announced, like Metroid Prime 2 and 3, Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD, the Fire Emblem remake that's been long rumored, F-Zero GX Remastered. And so, while there may still be new announcements that may impact the ratio could, in theory, get worse. And by worse, I simply mean more so in the direction of remakes and remasters. But getting to the point here, if we have things like Mario Wonder, Tears of the Kingdom, and more bundles than ever before, and in the strongest sales period of the year, Nintendo Switch is performing the worst out of the big 3, that doesn't bode well for the year after when you don't have Tears of the Kingdom or Mario Bros. Wonder, or that extra boosted effect of the Mario Bros. Movie impacting a lot of Mario sales. It's going to be years before we have the next big Nintendo movie to boost an IP. It's going to be years before we have another Zelda game like Tears of the Kingdom that's going to be this big of a seller. And so Nintendo's going to struggle even more so. The way sales trajectories work, when you're on a decline, maybe if there's a small decline, you might find a way to pick things up a little bit the next year. But typically, once you're on a decline after your peak in the 3rd and 4th year, you're just going to continue to go down more and more and more. And technically, we're on the 3rd year of decline of Switch sales, assuming that they hit that 15 million target and don't somehow miraculously reverse that, which they won't. This is pretty much the nail in the coffin of them having a positive trajectory as opposed to a negative trajectory, which Nintendo has been expecting for a long time. And so historically speaking, once we see the 2nd year in declining sales is when Nintendo announces new hardware. But during the Switch era, Nintendo has quicker turnarounds, and perhaps COVID did have something to do with that. But when we're looking at a 3rd year of decline, and we're looking at next year, where it's going to be pretty much impossible for Nintendo to have a healthy year of sales compared to this year or prior years with the trajectories we're looking at here, something has to give. Even Nintendo themselves, for those that doubt that Nintendo feels this way, literally right here in their most recent financial Q&A, they say, "We do not think it'll be easy for sales to grow on a year-to-year basis, especially for the hardware, since it has entered its 7th year." So the ultimate point here is that maybe you don't want to believe that Switch 2 is not coming out next year, or even the year after that, but all the numbers show that sales are going downwards. And with this recent update to the holiday sales and Switch being in last place for November, a big part of the most important sales period of the year, that doesn't bode well. And this is the year that we had the Mario Bros. Movie and Tears of the Kingdom. It's going to be tough to follow it up next year without something pretty special like a new system and a 3D Mario. I think Nintendo would prefer to have a year wherein sales increase instead of having the 4th year of declining sales in a row. So from a financial perspective, yeah, I think Switch 2 needs to come out next year. If it doesn't happen, will Nintendo be doomed? No, not at all, but it would definitely be a hit for them financially and just wouldn't be a good business decision, I would say. Of course, that's all assuming they have the resources to come out with Switch 2 in time. But given that the Switch has entered its 7th year, according to the president himself, which is longer than most generations of Nintendo, you would think that Nintendo would have been thinking about what comes next, especially when they just have one platform that they're focusing on now, all their marbles in one basket. They've been thinking about this, they've been preparing for this. I think they'll be ready. We know Nintendo sits on games, so from a software perspective, I'm not concerned about them having a strong release slate ready. Just comes down to if the hardware is going to be ready. And based off all the reports, I think so. But what do you think? Do these recent November sales numbers with Switch performing the worst in one of the most important sales periods of the year tell you that, yeah, it's about time for Nintendo to release a new system? Or do you still think that they should wait until longer? Let me know. Anyways, everyone, this is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.